Why are you here? Wake up! I screamed when I visited my in-laws' house and saw the doghouse in the backyard. To my horror, my 14-year-old niece was lying there in tatters. I hastily called an ambulance and immediately contacted my sister-in-law. However, when I tried to tell her about my niece, I received an unexpected response. That child is studying abroad in France. My sister-in-law said that bluntly and then hung up abruptly. What on earth was going on? Completely baffled by this inconsistency, I set out to uncover the truth. What I discovered was the worst possible scenario. I got married when I was 25. However, I soon lost my husband and had been single for 7 years since then. Having lost my parents at a young age, I was so grief-stricken when my husband passed away that I became too ill to work. At that time, it was my in-laws who worried about me. They even supported me financially until I could return to work. Mother-in-law, I'm so sorry for all the trouble I've caused you. What are you saying, Jennifer? You're like a daughter to me. Here's a spare key to our house. Come anytime you like. My mother-in-law smiled kindly and gently held my hand. I vowed to always be there for my in-laws if anything happened to them. I hugged her, tears streaming down my face, and made this promise in my heart. While my relationship with my in-laws was good, my brother-in-law Austin and sister-in-law Nancy were always harsh towards me. Even when I was invited to my niece Olivia's birthday party and sat at the table with them, Austin would sneer about how I had lost my husband before I could have children, and Nancy would loudly make snide remarks like, "We have Olivia, but you can enjoy being a single lady. Don't forget the debt you owe our mother for supporting you financially," Austin would say. Of course, I can never thank her enough. Well, you should show that gratitude through actions. How about helping out with Olivia's tuition? When Austin said this, Nancy nodded in agreement, and my mother-in-law raised her voice, her face red with anger. You too, that's enough. How could you say such things? It's all right. You all supported me when I was alone and going through hard times. My mother-in-law always scolded the couple, but I took their words to heart. It wasn't just because I felt indebted to my in-laws. Aunt Jennifer, are you okay? Dad and Mom can be pretty harsh with their words. The one who looked at me with concern and said this was 14-year-old Olivia. She was a quiet girl with short hair and glasses, and she was very attached to me. When I had lost my husband and was at a loss, my niece often visited my house to cheer me up. Olivia would listen to me talk about my work with sparkling eyes, saying, "Aunt Jennifer, you work for an international trading company and deal with people from all over the world, right? I'm so envious." Come to think of it, my job was my reason for living. As I spent time with my niece, I remembered that my husband had also supported my career, and I gradually regained my passion for work. It's no exaggeration to say that I was able to return to work thanks to her. Olivia, you've helped me so much too. I gently poked her soft cheek, and Olivia laughed and poked my cheek back. When I heard that she was aiming to enter a high school with a study abroad program, I couldn't help but want to do something for her. And because I felt indebted to my in-laws for their financial support in the past, I secretly gave money to Austin and Nancy for her tuition fees, as they had asked. I thought it would be for my niece's benefit. At that time, it all started a year ago when my kind father-in-law passed away. I'm worried about leaving Mom alone, Austin, who lived nearby, suddenly said and proposed living together at the in-laws' house. Even Nancy, who usually didn't try to interact with my mother-in-law, eagerly invited her, so my mother-in-law ended up living with Austin's family. However, once they started living together, Austin and Nancy began going out on weekdays and weekends, leaving Olivia behind. Sometimes, I was even called to the in-laws' house by Nancy to help out. One day, I received a sudden phone call from Austin. Mom's been admitted to the hospital for tests. It's your fault for always relying on her that she's gotten sick. You pushed her too hard. The next day, I was informed again that a serious internal disease had been discovered in my mother-in-law, and she couldn't be discharged. I was worried about her condition. Please let me visit her, I pleaded. What are you talking about? Even a slight cold could be life-threatening for her. You don't need to come. Stay away. When he said this, I suddenly realized my mistake. I had selfishly insisted on seeing her without considering my mother-in-law's feelings. I was ashamed of my thoughtlessness. Is there anything I can do to help? I asked. Well, I suppose we could accept some money for her care. You owe Mom, don't you? I immediately went to Austin and Nancy's house to deliver $3,000. I had heard it would be a long-term hospitalization, so I was sure my mother-in-law would have many expenses. Nancy came out of the entrance, quickly checked the amount after taking the money from me, and looked me up and down, saying, "Is this all? You're so ungrateful." However, she quickly said, "Well, I guess it'll do. Here, look at this," and thrust her smartphone screen at me. Mother-in-law. Ah, she looks better than I expected. That's a relief. The photo showed my mother-in-law sitting on a bed in what appeared to be a hospital room. Contrary to my expectations of seeing her covered in tubes, she was relaxed in her room wear. However, seeing my relief, Nancy sighed and said, "This is just a photo from when she was admitted for tests. It's much worse now. Please let me know if there's anything else I can do." I was frustrated that I couldn't help with the nursing care, as I was told that only Austin could enter the hospital room for hygiene reasons. After that, I started receiving frequent calls from him, asking for financial assistance for the treatment. I want Mom to receive the most advanced treatment, but it's too expensive to cover entirely out of pocket. You should pay too. According to him, my mother-in-law's health insurance didn't cover advanced medical care. I worked hard, believing that if it was for her to receive good treatment, it was worth it, and I gave him money whenever he asked. If this could make my mother-in-law healthy again, it was a small price to pay. I was also in daily email contact with my niece, who was worried about my mother-in-law, and we encouraged each other. At this time, I believed without a doubt that everything would turn out well. However, one day, I suddenly lost contact with Olivia. I wanted to set a time for our shopping date next week. Thinking she might be busy with plans with her friends since school was on summer break, I just sent an email and waited for her reply. But even by the evening before our planned meeting, there was still no word from her. This is strange. She's not the type of kid who would stand someone up. Feeling suspicious, I tried contacting Nancy, but I couldn't get through to her either. At that moment, feeling an odd sense of unease, I decided to go to the in-laws' house anyway. I arrived at my mother-in-law's house just as the sun was setting. There was no response when I rang the doorbell, and as I was standing there at a loss, I caught a glimpse of an old doghouse in the backyard of the in-laws' house. I knew they had kept a dog in the past, but I hadn't heard that they had started keeping one again. As I was looking at it curiously, I noticed something sticking out of the doghouse. Huh, what's that? It looks like a human hand. It was getting dark, so I couldn't see clearly, but I couldn't leave without checking. So I used the spare key my mother-in-law had given me to enter the house, opened the window leading from the living room to the backyard, and peeked into the doghouse. At that moment, my heart leaped into my throat in shock. To my horror, my niece Olivia was lying in tatters, chained up in the doghouse. "Why are you here? Wake up!" Olivia, sweaty and pale, remained motionless even when I called out to her. I hurriedly called an ambulance and then immediately phoned Nancy. I finally got through to her, but she sounded very annoyed. However, I had no time to worry about that, so I proceeded to explain the situation. "Nancy, I finally got through to you. Actually, Olivia is." But she interrupted me and said something unbelievable. "Oh, that girl is studying abroad in France." Moreover, after saying this, she added, "Austin and I are on a trip, so the house will be empty for about 5 days, and then hung up unilaterally. After that, no matter how many times I called, I couldn't get through. Olivia is here, so what on earth is going on?" Surprised by this unexpected response, I got into the ambulance that had arrived and headed to the hospital with Olivia. After that, thanks to the doctor's desperate treatment, Olivia recovered enough to speak. And from her mouth, the heinous acts of Austin and Nancy were revealed. I guess it's because that was discovered. Olivia said in a small, hoarse voice, tears welling up in her eyes. Seeing her emaciated and grief-stricken, I felt a hot anger well up in my chest, and I decided to seek revenge. While Olivia was in the hospital, I went around investigating. And I came to know even more shocking truths. What they've done. I called in a powerful ally and waited for Austin and Nancy to return. And 5 days after discovering my niece, I greeted them at the in-laws' house when they returned from their trip. "Welcome back. Did you enjoy your trip? You. What are you doing in our house without permission?" The two were furious, throwing their suitcases down in the entrance, and forcibly made me sit on the sofa in the living room. It was as if they were worried about me seeing something. I was surprised to see a doghouse when I came here after so long. Ignoring Nancy, who was making a fuss about trespassing, I smiled at Austin's face. And when I tried to look towards the backyard, he quickly stood in my line of sight, blocking my view. I was thinking of getting a dog as a surprise present for Olivia when she returns from France. Oh my, even though your mother's medical bills are so high. You really care about Olivia, don't you? I clapped exaggeratedly and pretended to be impressed. Austin looked uncomfortable, perhaps because he had been asking me for medical expenses, and Nancy replied with a cold sweat, "Of course, she's our precious daughter." "Ah, then I'll help by washing the doghouse since it's dirty." I smiled and got up from the sofa, dodging Austin and Nancy who were rushing to catch me, and headed towards the backyard. "Hey, don't walk around the property as you please." I ignored his voice and put on the slippers at the back door to go outside. When I peered into the doghouse, Austin clicked his tongue, and Nancy turned pale. There's an explanation for this. Austin, who had chased after me barefoot, tried to make excuses about Olivia being chained to the doghouse, but the doghouse was empty. "What's going on?" "There's no one here." Nancy also rushed over, and the two fell into great confusion. Oh my, was someone supposed to be in there? Like, Olivia chained up, perhaps. I glared at Austin and Nancy while lightly tapping the roof of the doghouse. The two of them flinched at the mention of Olivia's name and fell silent. At this point, I told them that I had discovered my niece 5 days ago and had already rescued her. Olivia had severe heatstroke. The doctor at the hospital said that if she had been left for one more day, she might not have been in this world anymore. I recalled Olivia, who had been having nightmares repeatedly during her hospital stay. She would always wake up at the point where she was scratching her neck in agony, unable to bear the thirst. The experience of being abandoned in the doghouse in midsummer left deep scars on her heart. Olivia can't even sleep alone at night, afraid that she might not wake up. I had been gently embracing her every time she cried and told me this. We would never do such a thing to our daughter. It must have been a burglar or something. Austin brazenly pretended not to know, completely oblivious to Olivia's suffering. That's right. We love our daughter. Nancy also made a big fuss, spitting as she spoke. It's useless to pretend. Olivia went through that because she found out about your terrible secret, right? I pointed at the two of them as if indicating the real culprits and shouted in an even louder voice. However, they looked at each other and started laughing sheepishly. Ha, have you been watching too many suspense dramas? Austin shrugged with a grin. At that moment, a voice suddenly came from the living room. Don't stay in the hot garden, come inside and talk. Austin and Nancy turned around at lightning speed. Mom. There stood my mother-in-law, with her hands on her hips. I've returned from the nursing home. At the word nursing, emphasized in my mother-in-law's voice, Austin looked down with a guilty expression. Yes, this was the secret that my niece had discovered. The story about being hospitalized for an illness was a lie. You forcibly put your healthy mother in a nursing home. When I shouted out the truth I had uncovered, the couple held their heads in their hands. You've done something terrible to Olivia. You too, come here and sit properly. My mother-in-law, with a vein popping on her temple, pointed at the hard wooden floor. I pushed Austin and Nancy, who were standing stunned in the backyard, into the house. I sat down on the sofa with my mother-in-law and looked down at the two sitting on the floor. In fact, 7 nights ago, Olivia had found a letter left carelessly in the living room. It was from my mother-in-law, and the name of the nursing home was written on it. The letter, in my mother-in-law's handwriting, said, "I'm full of energy. I wonder when I can come home." Olivia, like me, had been told that Grandma is hospitalized with a serious illness and that she couldn't visit, so she was surprised. She immediately confronted Austin and Nancy, saying, "What's this about? You told Aunt Jennifer that Grandma was in the hospital too, right?" And when she reached for her smartphone to tell me the truth, Nancy screamed, "Stop." The next moment, Austin, with a changed expression, caught Olivia and locked her in a room. According to Olivia, she spent 2 days without food or water after that. When she was dizzy from hunger and heat, Austin and Nancy came to check on her condition. That's when Austin suggested, "If this continues, Jennifer will find out that we've been tricking her for money." "I know, let's make it look like Olivia died of heatstroke while we were on vacation." So the two of them took out the doghouse that had been left in the storage room, put it in the inconspicuous backyard, and chained Olivia there. This way, we don't have to worry about her escaping. Outside, we can definitely get rid of her with heatstroke. When we return from our trip, we'll remove the chain, bring her into the house, and then call an ambulance. "It's perfect," Austin said with a smile. That was the last image of her father that Olivia saw. Even if she wanted to call for help, Olivia couldn't even make a sound because she was barely breathing. That's how dangerous her condition was. When I shouted with tears in my voice, Austin and Nancy flinched and hunched their shoulders. My mother-in-law also looked at them coldly. "What's this all about? You didn't use my money or your mother's savings to repay the debt, but for gambling and shopping, didn't you?" I handed my mother-in-law a box full of brand-name bags and accessories that I had found during my evidence search. Seeing this, my mother-in-law's eyes bulged. "For things like this, to Jennifer and Olivia." My mother-in-law grabbed Austin's collar and shook him back and forth. "It hurts. My legs are numb and it hurts." "That's not it. We were trying to increase the money through gambling and pay it all back at once." "That's right. We just had bad luck this time." Nancy chimed in, but my mother-in-law didn't loosen her grip. "Your legs are numb. That's nothing. I wonder what would happen if we left you without food or water for a few days like Olivia." As I glared at them with cold eyes, they must have thought I was serious about locking them up. Austin and Nancy burst into tears. "I've already reported everything to the lawyer. We're working on separating Olivia from you." "No. I'm sorry. It was my fault." Austin apologized, but there was no way we would forgive them. "You're going to pay back all the money I gave you and the savings you embezzled from your mother. And you'll repay your debts yourselves." When my mother-in-law and I shouted these final words, the two collapsed on the spot, crying. At that moment, the police that my mother-in-law had called in advance arrived. Austin and Nancy, their faces a mess of tears and snot, were taken away. After that, they were arrested and put on trial. According to the lawyer, they will likely end up behind bars for what they did to Olivia. The incident caused a big stir in the neighborhood, and when the news reached Austin's company, he was fired. All that was left for them was an enormous debt. The unemployed Austin and Nancy will surely spend the rest of their lives lamenting their miserable circumstances. On the other hand, my mother-in-law took in Olivia and offered to cover all the money I had given to Austin and Nancy. No matter how many times I refused, she wouldn't back down, saying that in return, she would make sure to demand repayment from them when they got out. I decided to live with my mother-in-law to take care of Olivia. Olivia has fully recovered and seems to be able to sleep soundly at night now. She hasn't given up on her dream of working for a trading company like me and is studying hard to prepare for it. Our days of watching over Olivia together with my mother-in-law are full of smiles and happiness.